Just so everyone knows, if you guys hold the space bar down to speak and let go of the space bar, then it will open your mic up and then close it back immediately. Just so everyone knows, if you guys hold the space bar down.
I don't have space for it.
So even when it's used, that'll work.
Yep, that's how it works. Pretty cool feature. I heard you.
You're weak, but I hear you. You're weak, but I hear you.
It's definitely not going through the microphone.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yep. Didn't have it pushed in all the way. He's not my waiting room either.
He's still trying to go.
Okay.
I'm not going to log out.
Leanne, can you hear me? Okay. Samuel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Kathy, can you hear me? We just had the air conditioner kick on, so I was curious on how that affected audio. Can you hear it through the speakers?
I hear you. Okay.
Okay, so can you hear okay, Kathy, even with the air conditioner on? Okay. Okay, we're going to go on and call the meeting to order and do the Pledge of Allegiance right now. Okay, we have a quorum. We have, I think, everybody except Jim Fox, who is trying to join, as I understand. Jerry is here and not on Zoom. So if Jerry has a comment, maybe we'll get him to talk very loud or something. So, all right. So discuss and take possible action on committee changes. Let me get my document. I should have done that earlier, sorry. Okay, so the Architectural Control Committee has one proposed change to add Matt Chauncey, Chancy, to that committee. Let's see. Other ones I had received email information about Land Use Committee, Lori Brundle Chair, also adding Matt Chauncey to that one. Let's see, Ways and Means from Brent Reed. So initially Jack Thies had said he thought he'd drop off. He changed his mind, so he wants back on. So we're gonna add him back on now. Let's see, nominating committee. Jim Mead is going to drop out there, and we're going to add Jerry Slater for nominating committee. Any other committee chairs changes? Jerry?
I have one that's not a drop off, but I'll add Kathy C to it.
Okay, you are on celebration. Okay, and you want to add who?
Kathy C. Same last name as mine.
Is it with a C or a K?
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else know of any? Okay, can I have a motion to, yes, land use. Do I have a motion to approve these changes? Jerry? Okay, Jerry. Since Jim's not here, we should be taking minutes for him, right?
If you would.
If you would, I just got a message from Jim Fox and Steve Wunderlich, both who are trying to log in right now and having difficulty. So if we could pause for just a second and see if we can get them in.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Because Randy is on by Zoom and his is still working.
Yeah. You were in, did you get kicked out?
Yeah, Steve was in for a while.
Okay, do you have the email that you can look at? You just-
I got him in.
right now.
He should be in now.
Looks like you're in school. Unmute yourself and tell us hello.
Charlie, he's in now.
Steve Wunderlich, can you say something for us?
He has
Say something, Steve.
Hey, Steve, can you talk? I've got you unmuted.
I don't have a way to unmute. You know, I can talk, yeah, but I can't unmute it. It won't let
Great.
me.
We heard you.
Good.
Use your space bar to unmute yourself.
I'm on an iPad and I have no
Oh.
space bar.
Okay, never mind then. You're good. Jim, can you speak?
I can. I'm,
All right, just checking your audio.
yes.
All right, we're good to go.
Okay, I think we're all here now. Jim Fox, Jerry C is also here. He's in the room, but didn't bring his computer with him, so you can't see him. So we'll let him talk very loud if he needs to add a comment. So what we've done so far is we did the Pledge of Allegiance, established quorum. Now we are taking possible action on committee changes. Jim, I will email these. I'll scan them in and send them to you like I did last time, but we've added Matt Chauncey to architectural control. We've added Kathy C to celebration. We've added Matt Chauncey to land use. We've added Jack Thies back to Ways and Means. He initially thought maybe he'd drop out. He changed his mind, wants to stay on Ways and Means. And we've deleted Jim Mead from nominating committee and added Jerry Slater to nominating committee. So those are the changes. And again, I will scan these in and send them to you, Jim Fox. So we've got a motion from Jerry C to approve. Do we have a second? Okay, Sam seconds. Okay, any other further discussion? Changes? All in favor, say aye or raise a hand. All right, anybody opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion passes. Next on our agenda is discuss and take possible action on the 2020-2021 budget. So I understand we are still missing the numbers from ARF. Is that right? That's the last thing we're missing, ARF. So
It's the breakout of the 6-month piece in the next 12 to convert everything to a calendar. Because all of your projections were on fiscal year, and it's a conversion to the calendar year.
okay,
And
and then ways and means though, are they somewhat satisfied that the continued rate that we had approved for last year would work, or?
Yeah, but and what I'm hearing from Brent is he's probably fine for the first next year, 2, 3, where he is, or they are more concerned is the big numbers are out there in 2030 to redo the golf course. And he's concerned that we thinking we might want to go ahead and start looking at those numbers and making sure they're sufficient to do the job that we need to do at the time. And that's going to, I think the golf committee probably ought to get somebody to come out, and because the 3 big numbers are redoing the grass on the greens, the grass in the fairways, and the grass on the tee box. So we might want to look at those future numbers and see if get somebody to tell us whether or not that is a what might be today if we did that job, and then what it might be then. Because those numbers are based upon the job that was done 10 years ago, plus an inflation factor.
So I guess the question is, are we comfortable just with the total ARF number as part of the overall budget number? So Charlie, do you want to lead us through the O&M budget?
Yes. Steve, can you give me a thumbs up if you hear me? Great, thank you. So if you go to page 2, I believe this chart is unchanged since our last meeting, which shows a O&M increase of $0. I've left the CARF out. I think that'll be a discussion later on, of course. ARF, we left in at 39.25, and I think Rick, you just addressed that. And everything I've heard, I think that should be a good number to use this year. And then we put in the 1250 in the lake management reserve fund, and then the garbage collection we put in 24 cents to take it up to $17 a month. Typically, they come up with an annual increase of 1.5%. So on the O&M, if you go to the next page on 3, the forecast, I did a quick update on that. It was very preliminary, very rough. It didn't include all aspects of the lodge, but it looks like the last couple weeks at the lodge actually got a little bit better than the first 2 weeks. And I say better, we lost money at a slower pace there. Now, I still think we'll end up, this is showing about $3,300 at the end of the year negative. I think it really depends on what the next, 2 months are there. It does, if you go to the manager proposed budget for 2021, it shows $51,000 deficit, 51,522. Remember, that's for 12 months. So if you really look at the overall budgeted period, it would be that times 1.5. So it'd be about $76,000 for that. So we are not, this does not contemplate a balanced budget. This shows a budget that you're going in deficit on. And we did that with a 0% increase on the fees on the other side, on the other page. And you remember my proposal was that we've got about 103,000 in surplus in O&M right now, is just let that ride and then let that, cover these proposed budget numbers, and then also what we may end up this year negative. So Jim, I think Jim Adams has a question.
For clarity, you're saying the 103, we would roll that over and that would cover the $76,000?
Yeah, it would be upward. I project it'll be upwards of 76, whatever our deficit could be this fiscal year. Right now it's at least $3,300. I said earlier, it could be 20,000, and then the 76. So that would be, about 96,000 total against the 103,000. So that's what once again, that's 18 months, or actually longer than that. It's about 20 months out that we're forecasting that. But yeah, that would be the proposal, just to leave the surplus O&M in O&M.
Okay, Clark. We just don't know what the deficit's going to be at June 30th this prime. And so there's still some wishy-washy there based on what we do at the lodge. And then this new letter from First State Bank is going to make a big difference on that number too, I think. I think it really will. So one of the things we might want to do is talk about that. I know we're planning from July 1 forward, but the next 2 months, May and June here, we don't know what that number is going to look like at the end of that period.
Yeah. I said anywhere from 3,300 on the bottom of this page 3 under the end of year forecast up to, it could be as negative as $20,000. Clark, do you want to elaborate on the First State Bank deal? Because we just got that today.
One quick question though, your number does not assume any receipt of SBA funds.
0, not contemplated.
Okay.
I know.
Got it. What we got was a letter from First State Bank with respect to our application for the Paycheck Protection Program. We have not been funded, correct, Charlie? Correct. We have not been funded yet. We are approved, and we asked for $80,000. And that was a function of the 60 days or 8 weeks of salary and burden at the lodge. And we could add up to 25% of that number, which is $20,000 in utility expense. We don't have any rent. That could have been included in that number. We don't have any rent. So we're talking only about utility expense. And one of the things that you've got to do under this program is if you have furloughed any employees, you got to bring them back. You got to bring everybody up to where they were before the pandemic. Okay. In hours, rates, the whole bit. I take that back. You can reduce salaries by 10%, but you've got to bring everybody back up. Okay. And if you read through this letter, I don't know whether y'all got it. I think Charlie sent it all out to everybody. That the SBA, I'll just try to paraphrase, but the SBA has now added significant tests to the PPP program for determining borrower eligibility. In addition to the initial test of whether an applicant should certify the need for funding due to the economic uncertainty, now borrowers and would-be borrowers are also required to evaluate their funding alternatives. While the SBA did not reinstate the credit elsewhere test, like a 7A loan, the SBA has stated that they will begin to scrutinize borrowers' alternatives to raise funding in public capital markets. We expect that the SBA will apply this new test to existing loans under the PPP as well as new applications. Borrowers should carefully evaluate and be comfortable making the required certification that the current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant. After taking into account current business activity and the ability to access other sources of liquidity sufficient to support the ongoing operation. Otherwise, the SBA may determine that you are not eligible and should return the funds. So that's where we enter into this, to me, my reading of this. If y'all recall, this is that exact certification I brought up before. This is where, however, they phrased it differently now. The thing is we had no lodge. 100% of those salaries were going to have to be paid from somewhere. There were no revenues coming in. Now we have some revenues coming in. Charlie's projecting somewhere between 3,300 and 20,000 between now and the next 8 weeks, which is that period. Okay. And they're also saying that the important part that they added here was the ability to access other sources of liquidity sufficient to support those operations. So if you borrowed 80 and you get the end of this 8-week period, which is June 30, which is this period we're talking about, and we only end up 3,300 to the negative or 20,000 to the negative at the end of that period. The way I'm reading this is that's what our number should be. If that's where our projections are. The key being when we did, and we came and arrived at that number, the rules didn't have this alternative liquidity deal in it. Now they do. They've added that. Okay.
It also defined alternative liquidity as the public funding market, right?
They did in that one section. In the next section, if you'll remember, it says, after taking account current business activity and ability to access other sources of liquidity sufficient to support the operation. And they bolded that.
20,000, and we took 80. We get back at a 1% rate.
If they came at it, yeah.
Well, there is another case that's worse because I was the one that attested to this. And it talks about going to prison.
That rule was not there when you attested to it. Okay. That phrase was not there when you attested to it. That's a new phrase. I'm sorry? Today. We got this letter today.
And then Jerry's second question was, are they going to apply that retroactively?
When you say retroactively, what do you mean by that?
Well, if we were approved for 80,000, is our test still just the old test? Or is our test now at the end of the 6 months or whenever we have to begin paying it back, is our test now the new test?
It will be at the end, at June 30. That's when it'll occur. And you've got to do certification again. To get,
okay. Under the new terms.
Yes. That's the reason I brought it up when we were talking about this. We're uncertain right now what that number looks like. Charlie thinks it's between 3,300 and 20,000 under this new scenario. You know, I really don't know. I don't know what kind of revenue from the lodge we can expect. And neither does Charlie. We can't project over the next 8 weeks what that revenue is going to look like.
But aren't you just paying it back though? So if we got 80 and only used 20 and we didn't get loan forgiveness, are we still just paying back the 80,000?
That's a good question. And I'm not exactly sure
Because I thought this was for the certification stuff's all for forgiveness. Even if you don't use it, you're gonna have to pay the whatever the full loan amount is. Well, if we don't use it, 60,000 still gonna be sitting there. We pay the 60,000 back, and there's a 20,000 we pay whatever it was, and now Charlie's not having to guess.
Yep. But the sentence says, otherwise, the SBA may determine that you are not eligible and should return the funds. It doesn't define the funds. It doesn't say it's the net.
That would be fine. Even if we had to return the funds and interest, we're talking $80,000 and $70. We don't want to build a plan around the 80,000.
No.
Or, yeah.
Okay, so Jim's point was we don't want to build a plan around receiving the 80,000 now, which is a good idea. We'll just move forward as if we're not getting it, and then we can make a decision whether we continue to pursue the SBA loan as we get more clarity on what these new rules really mean.
But we need to do that now. If you're going to pursue the SBA loan, you need to do that now because those funds are going to run out. Now, just so we understand each other, I've talked to Susan. Susan and I have discussed this a lot on not that, but how, not this new deal, but how to administer these loan funds when we get them. Susan set up a whole new GL to put those funds in on the revenue side, and we're going to use those funds first over that eight-week span to do what the original thing was to do. The issue is that I see in this letter, and this is in a letter from First State Bank. It is not the Federal Register. I have not gotten my hands on the Federal Register yet to know exactly how this is going to work. Okay. So what I'm saying is, and by that statement that if we borrowed 80 and only used 20, we got to pay back 60. Well, maybe that's right. Okay. I don't know yet. Okay. But Susan was that we'd already talked about, we're going to put in a separate GL and we're going to use it to pay salaries at the lodge. That was what we were going to do. Okay. And that plan remains. Okay. So we will know on June 30 what usage we got out of that. We just don't know now. And I suspect that this particular problem, this liquidity problem, exists at every one of these borrowers because they don't know when their states are going to allow them to open up, when they're going to get to continue, the barber shop, the beauty salon, one at a time, reservations, clean everything up. I mean, that's got to cost more. and the revenue's lower. So from a normal operation prior to the pandemic. So here we are. And I suspect every borrower out there has got in the same position that we're in with respect to what does that number mean? And I don't have any of the information from the SBA or the Federal Register so I can read it at this point. But I think we need to go ahead with the loan app because they're going to run out of money if we don't. And then we'll just take our chances on it.
I think our 80,000 number was done in good faith. And if the rules are different, then we should be prepared to give back whatever it is. And we'll be in a, we can figure out how to do that. And I'm comfortable, but you're the one that signed it. So.
And that's what I'm saying. I think we should go ahead with the app.
Okay, so we'll assume we're going ahead with it, but we're not going to reflect it in these budget numbers. Is that right? Okay, and then as we learn more, if there's a chance that we know for sure we're not going to be able to use it or get it rejected, then we'll withdraw our application or whatever we need to. So.
Well, we should be fine here very, very shortly.
Okay, so let's just proceed then on this budget. Charlie does not have any receipt of SBA funds on there, and we'll see where it ends up. So it sounds like the bigger issue is the actual 2021 18-month budget. 51,522 deficit over 12 months, or 76,000 deficit over 18 months. So what's your worst case scenario there, Charlie?
Close to $100,000 between now and the end of the year and, months after that. I think if conditions get worse, I think that's where we'll have to get back together as a board and look at tightening the budget or tightening the belt, so to speak. But hopefully it's, it's not going to, we don't know, but hopefully it's not going to get any worse than it has right now.
And so if it is 100,000, what are our reserves? Do we just fall back on reserves?
Well, we've got the contingency. The contingency is out there, and it's minimum of 3%, maximum of 4%. And so the contingency is out there. It's something that we've never ever dipped into. And if you look on page 4, it's listed there. At the end of this year, the contingency is forecasted to be $142,201. Next year's budget was $143,433. So we've never touched that. That's behind a proverbial glass case that's out there. So, and I think that's really set up for situations like this, but we preferably, wouldn't want to touch that. So.
Yeah, the contingency is not something built into annual budgets. It's a money in an account just sitting there. Is that correct?
Correct.
What's it invested?
Yeah,
CDs.
Yeah, just like everything we have is virtually invested, but yes, it's invested with the rest of them.
We do have, but you're saying we have 103,000 from our last previous budget that's ready to be carried over. That should offset the possible 100,000 that Charlie's projecting.
Yes.
If it was worse, we could look at contingency funds or the emergency funds, or tighten the budget further next year during the year.
That's correct. Right. Clark, you get a question?
And by doing that, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie and Rick, you may remember this, there was, I think Jim Marfus was asking for a little piece of that 103 grand to go to the Lake Fund. Is that right? Is that not right? He was asking for about 20 grand of it, wasn't he? If I remember correctly. And so that can't get done if we do that. And we've already moved, what was it, the 80 grand that was going to go to the pavilion. We've already moved that over to CARF out of there. So that used to be, yeah, that's gone. So
maybe it's a question for Charlie, but the lake management fee that was there last year, the $3.13, that jumped up an amount of 54,000. Is that still there? Jim Marfus is asking for additional.
at 331, the lake management had 41,200 in it, and it would work by the end of fiscal year. It would work its way up to 50 something. Right. No,
That's sitting in CARF funds, correct?
that's in CARF.
Right.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I don't recall the 20,000 other requests, but I don't think we can do that right now. I think
I don't think so.
we go
No.
with the 54 or whatever's sitting there in CARF.
Yeah, given the circumstances, that's what I was pointing out, that I don't think we can do that. And
Okay.
that request was made.
But somebody's watching us based on that.
The dilemma is I'm logged in on one computer to the Zoom and able to communicate. This is one, and I can't connect this computer to that projector. So if we need to have for your later part or whatever, then I'll have to show that with this computer and put the spreadsheets up there. So, sorry about that's what I was trying to get fixed. So I guess my suggestion, and it would be up to the board to make a proposal, really from today's standpoint, it's just more directional. Somebody's noisy there. If you could, yeah, would be if you all, I would suggest that we accept the O&M as it is, which is a $0 increase from last fiscal year through the next 18 months. That's coming in at a deficit, but I believe that the deficit that we're forecasting can be covered from the surplus O&M carryover that we had. Okay. Now we don't have to, this isn't going to be final until the board approves it in June anyway, but this just gives direction of, hey, don't work on that anymore, work on other stuff. Remember, we're also in the meeting 2 weeks from today, the board will have to vote on the overall, this fee schedule, which really drives the projects we're able to do in the O&M. So then we can put an article in the communique, and the article will go in the communique, and then we'll need to have a hearing with the members in June for them to be able to provide feedback on it. Now, what that hearing in June is going to look like, we don't know at this point in time. Okay, so I think from that perspective is that's really what we're voting, or I'd like, suggest or direction on today. I think once again, the bigger part would be getting into some of the projects and seeing how that drives the reserve fund aspect of it. So if that makes sense.
Okay, so let's see, Jim Adams or Clark.
Before we leave the O&M, Charlie, clarification for me, please. If I look at page 4, that's your overall expense by department. And that expense number in the manager proposed budget 2021 appears to be 4,781,000, almost 4,782,000. Is that right?
Yes.
If I go back to the front page, page 3, that's all the revenues, but yet it's got that, it's saying an expense, the difference between 7 million or 4,782,000 and 4,729,000. Is that 51? Is that right?
Should be. Did you?
I didn't do the math, but I'm just trying for clarification.
That's the way that the spreadsheet should be set up. Let me run the
Okay.
numbers here
All
real quick. Yes, that's, I was just double checking. You had me nervous there for a minute. And
Okay,
remember,
and so the expense at the food and beverage is less than last year, this projection?
for the forecast,
Yeah. No, for the proposed.
for the proposed budget. Yeah,
I'm just kind of walking department by department. If I look at food and beverage, lodge, food and beverage, the prior approved budget was 815. The forecast is 809, and we're looking at a proposal for next year of 784.
right. So if you look on page 3, this is the revenue side. So we budgeted food and beverage total revenues of 706,200. I'm forecasting 638. And then next year I'm forecasting 646,200. So, and then on the expense side, yeah, I did forecast an improvement in expenses of about $24,000.
And
How do we get that?
well, it makes sense to me. I mean, if we're forecasting less customers, we also buy less food. So if we're lucky enough to get more customers, we also get more revenue.
And I can go back and triple check that too. Right now, we are operating very inefficiently at the lodge, terribly inefficiently. Okay, in terms of where our labor costs is way high because of what we said earlier is we're holding on to our employees. So our labor costs, and this last month, as a percentage of sales, was about double what it should be. We did about half the sales we should have, and we had almost exactly the amount of labor dollars forecasted. Okay. The other thing is the most profitable things that we can sell here at the lodge would be draft beer on a cost of goods sold basis, and that's all evaporated. So the most unprofitable things we have is food. And then when you put it in carry out boxes and bags and all that other stuff. So you bring up a good point, and I tried to scrub this as best as I could. I did show some improvement in cost of goods sold and labor because we're way, we're very underperforming at this point. So
Okay. All right. That just seemed like a big number to me.
it's a good sized number. I will go back and relook at that and see, if I need some additional scrubbing going on. So
Okay.
there is too much uncertainty for me to But that's good. I appreciate that. So,
But I assume some of it still reflects an assumption of lower customer numbers, at least through the next few months of the second half of 2020.
yes.
Okay.
Charlie, um, the budget. And it's a little harder to, they're constantly trying to keep right now.
But I did have a couple of questions. I want clarity. You had a big adjustment in administration and I think an offsetting in costs and in the past by department. I'm going by department now. And I believe that was because you moved the staff members or reallocated.
So I just wanted to, and then
Could, are you speaking into the headphones or your notebook?
Yeah.
Is it?
Jim Adams' audio is not coming through very well.
Yeah, that's what I saw Jim Fox waving. So if you could figure out your microphone, that would be good.
test, 1, 2, test. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
So my question was just more of a clarification that the administration and lodge and food, there was some offsetting big adjustments that were due to a staff of reallocation.
Can you? Yes, that would be correct.
Okay.
I'm not going to take credit for this one fully, but Jim Fox and I were talking about some things earlier, and we just had some questions around public works and security. Those are
Pretty big drops. And
what's in that?
Are you okay on expenses?
yeah,
Jim Adams' audio is still cutting in and out here.
Did you hear that, Jim Adams?
yeah.
Jim, I just told him what we had talked about earlier, that I also had a question on public works and security, why those numbers were budgeted fairly significant part relative to the rest of the numbers.
But Jim, Public Works actually increases. Security does decrease by about 10,000. So are you sure you're talking about Public Works?
Well, let me address them real quick. Okay, if you look at board approved budget 1920 under Public Works, let's call that 482,000. I'm forecasting we're running 461,000. Jim Fox, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. So we've actually been a person down, a full-time staff headcount down for 8 or 9 months of this year. We now have that person hired. Okay. And if you see, we're going up to, I'm budgeting 490,000. So if you look at that compared to the budget, it's fairly small. It's the $8,125 number. So we've picked up some tailwind in that this year because we were behind a person. We're now fully staffed and taking it back there. And security, we actually have been running more efficiently there as well. Okay, so when you look at it, we're tracking in the neighborhood of 648. Some of that they've tightened up on their staffing. 2 chiefs ago, they tended to heavily staff. The previous chief, moderately heavy staff. So we've actually pulled that back in, but I am projecting a little bit of a bounce back of the 662 number. So the 662,940 is above what we're running in the forecast, but it's below what we budgeted last year. So I think once we get the right staffing on in that number, then I think, 662,940 should be a pretty good number. So, so that's how those are. once again, is if we're, and this goes back to a question that Rick Walker asked either last meeting or 2 meetings ago. In my budget, I forecasted to be 100% staffed with all positions in all departments. Okay, so there's no provision there for less staffing.
So, you know, we know, you know, people are going to be hanging on to a job the next few months. In a normal year, you can expect some openings, but I think this year, this is a good year to stick with our assumption of 100% staffing, and perhaps that'll work out to give us a little more slack or cushion in the event since we're going negative as it is.
Okay, I do have it up on the screen there. So I think these were the numbers Jim was just asking about.
Yeah.
That
explains-
30,000 is the one I asked about. Lodge food and beverage.
Yeah, and a big part of that is the, you know, we're coming off $60,000 in revenue, which would be $30,000 in food and beverage costs right there. But it also does show some improvements in cost, which I think that hopefully we will return. I mean, depending on what the new normal is, we'll have to figure out our labor model. And then we have changed food suppliers. It's really hard to get a good feel for what that's meant for us because our volume's off so much. And we're selling different things. But once again, we need to return to the chili dog draft beer model that are good, profitable items for us in a 19th hole that has at least 50% of the people in it. So.
Any other questions right now on Charlie's proposed O&M budget?
Just as a side note, once the financials become final for this month, then I will update my forecast. And when we have the financial review and then also the next board meeting 2 weeks from now, we'll have a better indication of what April's solid actuals were. And then we'll also have more of a heads up on the sales revenue for May. We'll have 2 weeks under our belt. So the 3 days this weekend were positive. Okay, it was better than we had in takeout only. The dine-in wasn't blowing and going in that much yet, but the overall numbers actually, came up by, 30 or 40%, the overall total. So it was encouraging. Yeah.
Charlie, do you need an actual vote at this point for us to adopt this as the O&M, or do you want to wait till the 2 weeks from now in the actual board meeting?
I'd rather wait as long as everybody's directionally fine with it. And that way, if we have any material changes between now and 2 weeks, then we can contemplate those at that point in time, and you don't have to unwind a vote. So.
Everybody okay with that plan? Sam?
One quick question. Excuse me, Charlie, you mentioned earlier we had 103,000 surplus in the O&M budget. How did we arrive at that as far as having that much left in it?
103,000.
I think you said 103, didn't you?
That was actually from last fiscal year that ended at June 30th. And the accountant went through and did all of our audit numbers, and they came out. It was actually 203,000 total. Okay, and we've already allocated a chunk of that over to the CARF account for the pavilion, and the remainder is still sitting out in O&M. So that's actually a carryover from last fiscal year. Okay. And remember, the members voted, actually, it's a year ahead. They voted on the surplus for this next year to be spent, for the next year. Now, I just told you, I don't know that we'll have a surplus this next year, but they did vote last year to spend whatever surplus. So it actually matches up quite nicely. I mean, in effect, it allows us to take care of our O&M expenses without taking a penny more from any of the members from the O&M.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then I think Sam's question, though, it seemed to me like, how did we get to the 203? So some of that was increased lots. Some of that was open positions, perhaps. Some of it may have been additional other sources of revenue.
Building permits, late fees, lodge sales were way over the budget. So, and really, when Clark, when he did the the treasury's report on the monthly basis, remember, he's telling you what all those surpluses are coming from. Okay. There's also a chance there also you'll create a surplus. If we budgeted to spend $10,000 on something and we only spent $9,000, that's going to create $1,000 surplus. So it's coming from a variety of different factors there. We're not talking about, we're talking about the potential deficit this year. That's on a forecasting basis. And we won't even know what that is until our audit's done and all that. Now, remember, something that helps us on the books is the depreciation. Okay, because in our current financial statements, there's no depreciation written anywhere. And all the money we spend on CARF and ARF, okay, those become depreciable assets, and we're able to take that depreciation out of those reserve and count it against our operating revenue. So that's kind of the simplistic approach. Clark, if you've got some addition to that, it's fairly complex when you look at our taxes here. Is we're almost like an individual that owns a company or has we're a not-for-profit, but we also have income that is taxable. So
I don't have much to add other than Charlie's right. It's a whole bunch of little stuff. And then when they complete the audit, they do the adjusting entries, which in and of itself, when you take you created a new asset that gets depreciated, and all that washes back through, and you'll create some revenue there as well. And it's just essentially year-end adjustment. Oh, and Charlie, that budget year, wasn't that 18-19?
What's that?
The year was budget year was 18-19 that created that surplus.
Yes, thank you.
Because our audit takes
Yeah.
6 months later to get done, right?
I was having to count back with my years. So really the next page past the O&M budget I have is 17, which is the Lake Management Project Planning Tool. And that's what was submitted by Jim Marfus on behalf of the Lake Management Committee. So I think what he's...
Add something. I also took what Jim sent us and I overlaid it into the project planning tool, which you can look at the same numbers, takes it all into account, not just the lake fund, as we look at CARF and lake management, because lake management committee is lake management and CARF or O&M, either one. Right now, I guess we're saying CARF because we already talked about O&M.
Right. And
Look at either place if you want to get a more holistic view.
I did take Jim Marcus out of West for $40,000 to come out of the current fiscal year to help with one of the self-prevention costs that we want to find. And I just knew where we are right now. He probably could not get that project done and it would have to roll over into the next period anyhow.
Put it into the 6-month period. So yeah. And is reflected in that tool also.
yeah, I think that was a good way to handle it, Jim. Just lump it all into yours. And as I understood Jim Marfus's, he's asking for, instead of 313, he's asking for basically $1.50 per month per member. Is that right in car funds?
That's what he said, yes. I don't know.
I mean, this is on our numbers.
I don't know this. What I guess I'm saying is
The money that he's asking for out of car
I'm not sure how that $1.50 reflects in those numbers. I'm not sure if he did any math. I've not having talked about that in another week. I just blended it in.
requests that were coming out of the car.
Right. So you didn't do the math. So I guess we could do that right now. Somebody with a calculator, $1.50 times 1,445 or whatever times 12. What is that per year?
That's $2,200.
Times 12.
Oh. 26,200.
It's a minor good side note. We have picked up one additional lot, so it's now 1,455.5. So minor rounding, but every little bit helps, right?
Yeah.
So,
$12.
yeah. Hey, it's better than the other direction.
That answers the question on how he came up with his funding numbers, and then you just plugged in his numbers rather than doing the calculation. Yeah, his spending.
Except for 1 or 2 years. That adds up. He's asking for 20. Did you say 20?
26.2 a year. That doesn't fund 40.
Right, doesn't fund the 40. So
That would be a problem.
Well, we're planning out of car.
one way or the other. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, he may be thinking that we're going to approve the $3.13 on top of the 150.
No, he's asking for $1.50.
Not 313.
Right.
That doesn't get it.
Well, how about we can have a side meeting with Jim Marfus afterwards and make sure we get clarity on it. So,
okay.
Yeah. So just back of the envelope, 225 per month per member adds up to 40,000 roughly. So I suggest we go straight to Jim's project planning tool.
and I don't know if this is the latest. This is dated April 30th. Is that the latest, or is there a later one?
There's a later one, but let's just work off of that one.
You're telling me. Who's on first?
Um,
I think
And your audio's still cutting out for some reason. I don't know.
that better.
Nope.
That better. That's
Now better. Better?
much better.
Okay.
If you would try to speak at the microphone, because when you turn your head, I think it
Okay.
drops out. So
I'm trying to decide where the best way to start this, other than maybe to just generally explain this spreadsheet. If to start out is, and I will, Jim Fox. There was a version of this spreadsheet that existed as of a couple of weeks ago. Jim Fox took a look at it and made some adjustments to kind of fit it to these pages and make it visualize a little better. And so I don't. It's page 1 of 6 on this project planning tool.
About 3 pages back after that. Very good.
is that page 21? Page 21.
Yep.
So the project planning tool, I have the current fiscal budget, which we can pretty much ignore for this conversation, which is grayed out. And then I think the first thing we start to talk about is to the right side of the first, page 1 of 6 in this, is the 6-month project. And here you'll note that there's the ARF fees, the CARF, CDRF, lake management, and then O&M. Really, we're going to be talking about CARF here. ARF will fill in its numbers in the coming days. CDRF doesn't exist anymore. And then the lake management fee is the $12.50. And we should talk about lake management too, because that'll be part of this project planning. So we really want to look at the CARF column and the lake management columns going forward. And what I think, what I've done is over on the left-hand side, listed all the projects that came out of long-range planning. And then the lake is up. I pushed the lake up to the top because that's already an approved fund and the members voted on it. So I pushed that up to the top, and then below that is like the dam spillway, which we already have an agreement to do something. So that is on there at the very towards the top, right below the lake, and then the guardhouse, et cetera. And so we know that's the priority. So this is, as you get further down the list, you'll start to see things like golf improvements and drainage to be determined, just numbers that say to be determined. And that's just things that I started putting out there for my long range planning committee to visualize and start thinking about. And so we don't have any numbers on those things. So it's really just becomes, unless you guys want to move something up in priority, but so that the list starts at the top and works its way down in priority, I believe. It's that essentially serves the same. I was looking at the same page with the left-hand column. Okay, I was still looking at this.
So is this the page
that you can, yeah, yes. And if you can start to scroll over to where it says the first 6 months, the 6 month, scroll to the right. Yes. And, I almost have to really, for what? You really, well, now you have, what I guess I'm asked, I come in here to suggest is that what we need to be discussing is, are these the right projects? Are they in the right budgeting period? And then, do you think the estimates are reasonable estimates? And if that's the case, as you scroll across the pages, then I think it almost we can start to work the math backwards to figure out what a CARF fee should be, or and what makes up CARF.
So right now, your proposal is the same as last year, 2438, and that's how you get your revenue numbers.
Not my proposal. I just left
on
that
all these.
number in there because that was the number last year, and if we carried that forward, you could see how the balances work out. So if you go across the top of the page, towards the top of this page, it says there's the beginning balance. So if we're looking at CARF right now, it starts out with a negative 354. Am I saying that right? Or it's 354, maybe. Oh, the red. No, I'm sorry. It's not negative. It's red because I wasn't sure that's the exact right number. Charlie, I think that's the right last projection I had. 354,736 for CARF.
It'll be close to that.
Right.
That does not include FERF, the FERF funds or anything. That's just pure CARF. So you can't take.
Okay.
You've got, see that first FERF expenditure in the next 6 months, 75,000.
Yes.
That's coming from a bigger CARF number.
Fair. I mean, okay.
And that number is from a FERF. FERF should be about 40,000 in that 6 month period. But what's not there is the 150,000 that comes out of FERF for the pavilion. I've got all those numbers broken down here.
Then that'll make using this, or even if I brought you if I could put up on the screen one that is interactive when we could play with the numbers and stuff, that means if we don't have the right starting balance in CARF,
and you don't have the right,
then anything you would do out to the right. And I think maybe then this becomes the discussion right now is, do you think these are the right projects? Do you think they're generally in the right fiscal period? And do you think they're the right estimates? And then, and the same for the lake, and same for any of those projects that would appear in the 2026 month, and then on the reverse of your page, the 2021 funding. Those projects may not be funded in those first 18 months. They're still planned in future years. I still think it's important that we project them into the right fiscal year. It's not quite as important right now, but that's important for us setting the right CARF fee to know that we're saving the right amount of money to get there by that year. So I didn't come in here with any particular proposal. I was thinking if we agreed on numbers and we plug these projects in, then it would basically automatically tell us what the number should be. What we don't want is 10 years from now, or anywhere from 1 to 10 years from now, if we have projects, I would say that the CARF fee can't fund those 10 years worth of projects, maybe. And we could say 5 years. I don't know. I'm just threw out 10 because that's how far the lake management fee went out.
Yeah, so what we have to realize is by holding the line now, basically, if we plan to escalate those numbers in the future, those numbers are still going to be less in the future by holding the line now. Does that make sense? So you don't get the compounding effect of an increase this year. So that does possibly affect the timing of future projects in that 10-year period. You know, we're not collecting as much for projects, but I still kind of think right now, with the lake fund coming in this year and the financial impact of the coronavirus, that's kind of the right thing to do is hold the line. But
hold the line on what?
the total fees?
I think it's possible. Well, shouldn't say that. After Clark just told me what he just said on FERF, I don't want to agree to that. What you just said was hold the line. And I was going to come in saying you could probably lower it. But now I've heard about FERF. Till we plug in the numbers, I don't know.
Right.
Hey, Jim, let me give you a warning.
Okay, Clark, you're saying the CARF, total CARF balance, including FARF that he's starting with is correct?
At 331, the total CARF balance is 767,000. But we've written a check for the pavilion furniture for 17,000. And there are FERF funds. The sub FERF number is 323,000. The lake management number is 41.2. The dam number is 42.8, which leaves in actual CARF 342.6.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Now, in the FERF number, the 323, there's still 150 in that number that goes to the new pavilion, which has been delayed with respect to that because of the delay of the pavilion construction. We pushed that all the way out to July. And we haven't, with that number has not been dispersed yet. So it's still in that FERF number.
Do we need, I know that FERF is now a subset of CARF, but do we need a column in here for FERF so we fully understand what that fund is set up for and what it's being used for?
I thought at some point
It's easy to do.
that we were going to make FERF, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, that Jim Marfus had suggested that at some point in time in the next year that we make FERF, we put it on the bylaws and make it a true fund and not a sub of CARF. Because FERF has a list of assets not nearly as long as ARF, but there it is. And there's some additions to this list going to come when they finish the pavilion, because you got staining, you got bathrooms, we got to go in and plug all that. Then when we build the guardhouse, there's some guardhouse money in here that gets allocated over to a new guardhouse when we finish the guardhouse. Then we got to plug all that refurbishment type items into the list. And so this list is growing.
So I agree, Clark, that is the plan, and that's why I think we need a separate column for it, even though technically it's a subset of CARF for the bylaws. But I think for budgeting purposes, we need it kind of broken out as a separate column.
So if you're going to do that, are you going to also kind of there's 3 sub-accounts in CARF. There's FERF, there's the lake management, the $3.13, the old one. And then there's the dam fund. Now the dam fund's only going to be around for 2 years, this last year and the next year, to pay those engineering fees, right? And then it supposedly goes away maybe.
Well, we need to, going forward, I think we should just adjust CARF and not keep having these sub accounts, if you ask me.
Oh, I agree.
Just do CARF and put aside and change the number up or down each year to allow for these sub projects. That's what CARF is for.
I think clearly on the dam engineering, that's the way it ought to be handled. I think FERF needs to become its own official account through a vote. Go ahead, Randy.
Just from the past and talking with ex-board members that whenever I start thinking about stuff, I go talk to the guys that have been there and done this before. And I've had 2 of them that warned me about going down on your, trying to worry about going down on your dues because of the 5% that you can only come up. Said people are not worried about what your dues are now. They're worried about what they're going to be 5 years from now. So you don't worry about going down. You just worry about trying to hold your line if you can. That way you can still finance your projects and stuff. That was just from the old guys.
Yeah, I'm with him on that. I think what we've got here, though, in this particular year, is we're starting to collect that $12.50 for the lake management fund that everybody voted on. And so there's automatically a $12.50 increase in your dues right there. So, you know, shocking the citizenry, I think becomes an issue here in this year.
Yeah. So I think we're, I guess, in agreement. The dam fund just stays a part of CARF till it goes away. The dam engineering fund, the FARF, FRF eventually become its own line item, and therefore I think we need a column for it. The question then remains on the whatever the old lake management fund. How would we handle that, Clark? You got a
Can I,
thought, or Jim?
before you go to that, when you said FERF have its own column, it's one thing to put it in its own column and account for it separately from CARF. It's another thing to call it its own fund and put it in the bylaws. As soon as you do that, we need to have a vote by the general public, just like we did on the lake management fund.
That's what they were thinking about doing.
Right. And so, well, it's fine with me either way. I can make the spreadsheet work, obviously, but
There seems to have always been an opinion that should have been done a long time ago, that FERF should have been voted on by the membership to become a fund, a recognized by law fund.
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
So I guess we start out putting it in its own column, but then we have to work on creating a bylaw change. And
That's right. So we need to still account for it like we publicly stated it would be accounted for. You know, it's going to be used for these purposes. We need to stick with that. And until we have the actual election to memorialize it in the bylaws, I still think we need to show it separately so we understand where the money's coming from and where it's not coming from. So that then leaves the question about the old lake management fund, the 330.
Yeah. And maybe this CARF header up here, there's a CARF and there's 3 little subs under that. So it's really stays in CARF, but there's 3 little subs under that somehow. You know what I'm saying?
mm-hmm. We can do it that way too.
Well, actually, if you look at the 3rd tab in the spreadsheet, it's got that broken out. You see up on the screen there. So if you go to
spread out column B and G.
What is that?
this was in the spreadsheet.
That's what it looks like here.
This one, is this?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I think that's essentially the same thing.
Okay, I don't have the sub.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's not it.
That's not it. That's not it. We may not have that one in our packet.
I don't have that one.
I'm sorry.
We don't. Yeah, we didn't print that one off.
Not in our packet, but I think that is handy for us to understand what how we'd been breaking down that CARF, the total fee in the past.
Yeah.
So one thing is, this is out of the new spreadsheet that Jim Fox and Jim Adams got together on. So it just came out last week. So I think what we probably ought to do is take a step back and re-scrub it and then make sure that everything's pointing in the same direction. And then also, and I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo. Is everybody getting an echo? Okay. So also, I think what we can do is get with Susan. Susan has done a forecast for the ending balances for all of the funds at the end of this fiscal year. Okay, and she has it broken down in the detail that you want it with the sub accounts and the whole bit. I will tell you, there's a pretty good amount of cash outflow that's going to go to the pavilion to finish up. So I think that's one of the things that's not showing in this number here for the CARF number. I think CARF is going to end up this fiscal year somewhere just CARF by itself in the $50,000 range. Then you add the FERF back into it, and I can't remember exactly what that's going to be. But what we can do before the next meeting is put it there. I think intuitively what I've looked at is with what Jim is proposing at the consolidated CARF at $24.38 and the projects that he has listed this year, I think that's, this next 18 months, I think that's all doable. Okay. Because remember, we kind of looked at that last time. We said guardhouse at 300,000. We said dam spillway comes from this. And really, then you've just added a couple more little projects. I think golf cart bridges, and what was the other one that you added there? Yeah, you just put a dollar amount behind it. Yeah. Yeah, the gate access, which is actually fairly small. I say it's fairly small in the grand scheme of our budget. It's fairly small in the gate access. Part of that funding is also going to be out of ARF. Okay, so a chunk of that's out of ARF. So I do think that my proposal is let's sharpen the pencil on this spreadsheet right here. I think it's a great step forward in terms of consolidating everything, but I think we need to just, pull it back together and make sure, hey, the ending balances are the issue right now, right? I mean, that's the operative issue. So, but I intuitively, I think it's pretty close with your projects too. So, yeah. You want a laser pointer? Would you rather point? You got a point?
Be good.
Okay.
And if you go back to that spreadsheet that you were just on, I can take this off then. Test, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I got dead batteries.
I probably
Oh, here
have.
we go.
I was gonna say, I have one.
Can we take a 5-minute break? Or
I probably have one too.
I already did.
All right. For those of you who are on the phone, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 3:45.
we'll resync technology. I'll get you a laser pointer, a bathroom break, and
I
you'll be
got-
on the right spreadsheet.
Okay, 3:45. Thanks.
I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do the bio break.
Oh, this is all being recorded.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank goodness I said bio.
I gotta let my own laser Charlie, could you go back to that breakdown of the fee, the fees that you had?
This one here.
Yes. You go to 2020 is good. Well, right there, perfect. You're perfect because okay, this is what we're operating under right now. And if you'll notice, everything here if you come down to the first 6 months or in the 2018 or the 12 months too, everything I left it the same, but I changed this to 210 from 325. I only did that because we don't need to collect 325 for 18 months to get to 50 something thousand dollars. So that I did blended it down and found out about 210 is where we get just over enough money to pay that dam spillway agreement. So we're saying CARF is already down to 2323, leaving things as they are. I then would say if you thought all these projects were in the right place and we adjust this FERF thing that we were talking about, I would propose that we wouldn't run into any negative numbers until like 6 years or so out if we were starting to do a lodge renovation on the exterior. And that's where you might see a bit of a negative number, which maybe even still could be sustained. And like Charlie was saying, technically we want to try to make it so that number hits zero or pretty close to it. You want a little padding, but because for CARF, because as long as your budget numbers are right.
But you don't want, if it's really going to cost you phase 4 of the lodge renovation, $750,000.
Yeah.
You need to start building that for that today.
No,
to get there.
And that's what I'm saying. So you have to look out and make sure that no 1 year goes negative. And I agree. So it's why that when big projects come in future years, they can throw your cart because you got to be saving for that big project down the road. So we looks like we have over an extra amount of money, but it is for a savings to pay off something planned in the future. So,
and I'd suggest on the old lake fund, the erosion control, whatever you have there, why don't we look at something like 225 that generates that 40,000 a year that they're wanting to spend for those projects. And right now you carried it down as 313.
Yes.
So let's put that in at 225.
Okay. Yes, that's what he's saying.
So I guess in my mind, the problem I have with this process here is that you can't change the long range plan then.
Yeah, not in the next 18 months. You're right. You're right. But I don't think we want to. I don't think we want to take it down all to zero. So, yeah. Now Jim's asking for input on just the projects right now. And so I think they align well with the last survey. I think they align well with what other previous boards, at least the last couple of years, have thought. So I would suggest we just leave it that way. Does anybody have any other input for Jim, though, on the prioritization of these? Is there something out there, like Randy, did you have something in mind that may be different from this?
Well, you've just heard my spiel before. I've been here 25 years now, and there are two things that have not changed one bit. We have not changed the driving range. We have not changed the guard shack. I mean, they're identical. I use an analogy of a guy buying a house 30 years ago and keeping up with it. And then all of a sudden the kids come along and you start asking what can we do? Where do you want to put the money? And they start saving for a boat. Well, all of a sudden it comes time to paint the house, put a new roof. Well, you got your choice. You can upgrade what you got, or you can go buy something new. Well, the kids are all going to want the boat, But as adults, you got to take care of what you got. And that's I'm looking at that driving range. It's a 30-year-old, and it gets used tremendously. And we start looking at our basis for what needs to be done. You know, the fitness center, I'm all for it. My wife will be up there every day. But that's something that showed up in the last 2 years that we can't even go to a gym right now because we may not be able to for the next 2 years. So, I mean, that's just my throwing it out there.
The fitness center isn't on this projection. It was what the survey said. I will say that the survey and the long range planning committee factored all that in, and the fitness center did get a lot of requests. So it was why it's higher than the driving range. The driving range is listed in these list of projects. And also the fitness center isn't in the next 18 months, nor is the driving range right now. So the main projects again for the next 18 months would be the spillway, the guardhouse, the cart bridges, the east gate access, and then there's some parks money, which I was in there. I will say that the land committee is looking at the 50 acres and the driving range as kind of a whole. And Jim Fox's parks and stuff has some really good ideas on how to look at the whole 50 acres and the driving range also. And that we ought to build a plan before we go do anything to the driving range. We should really have a good plan what we're doing for all the acreage so that we adjust the golfing range properly in the beginning. So again, we can move it to where everybody wants the driving range versus something else, but neither one of those are on the current 18-month budget.
Well, but that's because the guardhouse
That's
is.
correct. It's further on down the list, but that's what I was getting at. See, the driving range has been up at 1 or at 2 since I've been back 5 years ago because we went out and did I got the whole financials for it. It's already been past that stage, and it just keeps getting knocked down and knocked down. Different people on the long range committee, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's not what I'm knocking, but I'm saying it's just depends on who's there making the decisions. It's like, what's an essential business? Well, it's who's defining the word essential.
I don't disagree with Randy. I'm not saying the long range long range planning committee based it on the survey. So now the guardhouse honestly was probably pretty light. That one has been on there, and it really wasn't part of the survey because it was already part of a plan that didn't get executed because of the pavilion. So the guardhouse just stayed there at the top of the list. I will say that the long range planning committee did say, we'll just leave that at the top of the list because it was already approved before. And then that's how everything fell in behind it, just to give a full history.
Yeah, that's one that if you had a survey, it's not going to appeal to many of the members because they're not the ones sitting inside there every day, right? And having to deal with the customer. So there are other reasons to prioritize something like that other than the survey, particularly if it affects employees.
There wasn't even any questions related to it either on the survey. It wouldn't have given it a chance to get on the survey because it was already a prior project. That's all I'm trying to say.
No, it needed to be done, and it still needs to be done. That's the first priority, without a doubt.
Fitness centers listed at $250,000. Did they take into consideration how much it's going to cost to run the thing? Insurance?
There's a number plugged in there from the past. I mean, there is no details around. We do not have a project plan on a fitness center as of right now. So if we want to take that up in the following 12-month budget to follow this 18-month budget, we need to have somebody start working on what that would look like and to answer your questions.
So including O&M costs. I don't know that insurance really changes because we've got pretty broad insurance as it is. But yeah, definitely O&M and upkeep, things like that. It's an impact.
equipment that would have to be purchased to operate it too.
Equipment to purchase, and maybe that's in the capital cost, but it would need to be replaced at some point as well. So
Any numbers that you see in the project planning spreadsheet as an estimate, and this is for the public record too, they're just estimates. I mean, they're just they're one of those sophisticated guesses, just somebody pulling a number saying, I think that seems reasonable given what we're trying to do. What we typically would do, and somebody can correct, Charlie can correct, or any one of you prior board members, is the year before we would actually start the project, we'd get more detailed plans and a stronger estimate so that we're prepared for the budget that it's going to hit.
And Charlie's had some discussions on the guardhouse. Are you feeling the $300,000 plugged in here is good? Good. Okay. All right. Any other input to Jim on the projects that he has listed, at least for these coming 18 months? Okay, yeah, so I think that's the plan, to get together, kind of carve out a column for FERF so we know exactly what it is. Y'all figure out how to do these other sub-CARF accounts, just so we know where it's going. FERF in particular has to have the annual expenditures tied to Clark's spreadsheet. Same way with ARF, we need that nailed down, the annual or the 6-month expenditures in there.
May I make a suggestion?
And then I think it all comes together at that point.
Could I suggest that we form a short subcommittee here of us, or that might include Clark, myself. I think Jim Fox has some interest because he's been helping me on this, and Charlie. Anybody, as long as we stay under 5 people, is that okay? 5 board members, we're okay. Is that right? So
yeah. Just
is anybody else?
At least copy me on there so I can look at the calculations. I'm not going to change your formatting or anything. I just want to make sure that the calculations, that they're all going.
I was just wanting to say that some group of us, Susan, some group of us, and if anybody else is interested in joining that, and we not go over 5 board members, then we
don't want
4. We want
create
4.
a quorum.
Yeah, we want 4 board members or less. We got 1, 2, 3 right now. So if somebody else wants to join, fine. We'll copy everybody on everything that we do. But so we'll form that, and we'll just start. I'll call a meeting for that group.
Sounds good. Good
Okay.
suggestion. So. Charlie, anything else on the budget right now you need direction wise?
No, I think for the next meeting 2 weeks from today, what I'll deliver is an updated forecast for the end of the fiscal year based on April's results and what we've got in the first 2 weeks of May on revenue at the lodge, particularly. Jim just got a subgroup put together, so we'll sit down. It might work best to be in this room. We can put it up on the screen there and go through and just synchronize. What Susan can do is pull us the forecasted into this fiscal year, what we've already got committed, and she's got a pretty darn good handle on it. I do think that we will contemplate the complete spend on the pavilion, because that's money already committed. You understand what I'm saying? And make sure that that's covered and taken care of. And then we'll, kind of restart on July 1 and look at it and go from there, and then go through the projects. But I think the projects he's got listed are sound. I do think, as a side note, he did also have $11,000 in there for the proposed design work for the guardhouse. I do think that would be something that would be a next step with that one. Okay. To make sure, because then, you asked me earlier, is $300,000 enough? I think that's where we'd want to get, a company and say, this is our bottom line dollar amount for this.
What you're saying is move that 11,000 up into the next 6 months.
Absolutely. I think sooner rather than later. And I think what we learned on the pavilion is begin with the end in mind in terms of saying, here's the dollar amount. Because when you think about it, I don't know that it's going to be too much over 1,200 square feet. You know, really, when you think about it, it's a fairly small structure. So you figure out the dollars per square foot, that's pretty expensive, right? So, you know, most of the new houses out here are in the $165 a square foot. Probably that's on the top end. So it's $150 a square foot. So I think that gives us some room. But yeah, and so then when we have the next meeting in 2 weeks, we'll have the O&M refreshed, and then we'll have the project planning refreshed and have a, you know, a clearer perspective on that. So.
Very good. Sam, you got something on the budget?
Not necessarily on the budget, kind of to fall back on what Charlie's talking about. You know, we always talk about remodeling that guardhouse. Has there ever been, I guess you could say, some brainstorming by a group to where you have an administrative building? The guardhouse becomes just a guardhouse. You know, we always, everything is, hey, let's remodel this whole thing. In my mind, I see all type of traffic tie-ups, these type of things that have to really be thought out. And I don't know, it's just one of these things I got thinking the other day. We got a parking lot, we got property over there. Has anybody ever thought about building an administrative building, making a guard shack a guard shack? Let that be what it is. Anyway, I would just like to see maybe a little bit more brainstorming before we start, you know, really getting involved with getting a consultant to come up with plans or what we want to do. Just my opinion.
Kathy's going to unmute here.
We have been looking at technology because a lot of what the guards do is very manual, and they don't have systems. They have Post-it notes. And if you look at some of the larger organizations we have visited, Pecan Plantation is a good example. They put a lot of their security people in a call center environment, and they do everything with cameras, everything's online. And so they have a little house where the gates are moving 90 miles an hour with a guy there. So it changes your process. And if we would look at the technology capabilities and then kind of apply it to Kiowa, and that gets into Eastgate's part of that conversation, and trying to speed the lines both in the front as well as at the East Gate. So we've done some of that, but you're right. We've never been able to really have an owner of security that understood that, because this is business process now we're talking. And you put together your requirements and how are you going to operate in the future? Don't build what we've built already. We need to rethink how we do what we do and get technology. Everybody has a tablet. They do everything in their car while they're patrolling. It would just change the dynamics completely. And you're probably right. We could build something for less. Now, disaster recovery was a big issue for us, because if, God help us, if a tornado rips through that guard shack, there's no place for those people to go. There is no backup, and it'll knock everything out. So we were trying to build both redundancy. You couldn't take them down. They'd have a safe house for one or two of them to stay around. But we did do a lot of that work. But if you just start making plans and you haven't walked all this through and how you're going to operate tomorrow, you're right. You're going to build something that you probably didn't really need.
Yeah, kind of what you're saying is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Together, you know, the safety security committee, some of these different committees, you get one person from out of it, do brainstorm and say, hey, is the direction of just remodeling that guardhouse, is that really what we need to do?
No.
Is it, you know, so.
If you move the people who truly do office type work in an office area, that building could be anything. You don't have to build what we were trying to bill for them. But once again, it's got to have the technology, that capability, so they're not doing everything so manual.
So those are really good points. So Clark, you got something, Dan?
I think to answer Sam's question, I don't think it's, I thought it was contemplates, I don't think it's contemplated to remodel it. I don't think it's remodelable. I think it's a scrape and start from scratch and let's figure out what works.
But in general, I like that idea, Sam. And so it seems like our security chief, Kathy is head of technology, yourself is head of security. I don't know if Charlie wants to get involved at this point now, but that's a good start on somebody to really do what you said, kind of start from square one with a brainstorming concept. So I like that idea. So before we get too far down the road on that, let's think about doing that, Charlie.
Okay.
So who's going to lead that, Sam or me?
Sam, you want to lead that?
I'll take it.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll leave it up to Charlie whether he wants to participate in that. I know we want the security.
He will participate.
but we want the security chief for sure. Okay, anything else on budget before we move into the COVID response agenda item?
I had one question. This was for Jim on page 23 of that document. I noticed, and again, though, this is under ARF projects for 2024, $1,028,817, and I'm wondering where that came from. Page 23 on the handout that Charlie gave us.
That's a number, it comes out of the schedule.
Because I looked at the schedule in there for 2024, 2023, that amount is not in it.
Well, do you have the new one or the old one?
I got the one that Susan. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I said at the beginning that the ARF, that's why they're yellow. They're not the right numbers. Okay, anything yellow, I should have, and I said ARF and FERF were not right, but anything yellow is probably subject to question. Anything red, we really need to make a decision on it.
So, what really,
Can you hear me? What really makes this process confusing at this point in time is the transition from a fiscal year to a calendar year and having those 6 months. So I think the ARF schedule you looked at was probably for fiscal year, okay? And until we get past it, it's just going to be confusing. I mean, it is, okay? And I think another way to look at it is you kind of look at the ARF over a course of a year. Some things like that were forecast to be in the next fiscal year are going to fall in the first 6 months. Okay, the next 6 months. And then what was in the second half of the last fiscal year will get glued on with the first half of that next fiscal year. Okay. You kind of run in circles if you let yourself. You understand what I'm saying? So we almost, it's going to have to sit down and the ARF schedule is probably the toughest part of it. In the sub account of FERF is going to be somewhat equally tough with it because it's on the fiscal. So we've got to just kind of clean it up and have to do a clean break. Okay. And say, okay, we have half of a fiscal year for that first 6 months. Then we have a full, fiscal year, which is then going to be a calendar year. So I think the numbers, I think this was, I think it was a great job of pulling all this stuff together. We've got to true up all the numbers. And once they get cleaned up, they'll get cleaned up. Susan has started working on making the ARF schedule as Clark alluded to before. So we have a 6 month and then we have an annual piece. But it gets real confusing real fast, with that when you start thinking about it. So, okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, let's move on to our COVID-19 response. Also, we had several questions sent in, and several of them are kind of related to that. So let me just read through the questions that Leanne has sent us so far. And so
Hey, Rick, you're muted.
because every
there
time I
you
hit
go.
the space button, it just goes crazy. Okay, so Warren Hill says, if the lodge is now deemed safe to open, what conditions must be met to open the golf course for our guests? By now, everyone has been educated on social distancing. At the very least, many of us have adult family members who could be considered late guests. Ralph House, let's see, this is a package delivery issue. I don't know why an Amazon package, so I don't know the answer to that, didn't get delivered. Let's see. Now, and this one is from Donna Marfus. Now that the lodge and dining rooms are open, would the board consider opening up the assembly room for the Kiowa on Tap Dance Group? We keep it 6 or less, practice social distancing and other CDC guidelines. Dan Bush had a dumpster question. Steve Wood, that's a walking track question. Okay, William Squirick. I don't understand the policy of not allowing guests who are immediate relatives to use the golf course with members present in light of the new Texas regs and outdoor nature of golf. It seems the policy goes too far. I'd like to know when this policy will be rescinded. So 2 golf course questions and some other lodge use questions. I think the question on the lake, those are the things I think we need to think about where we are and if we want to keep them. So Kathy, you want to kick us off on the COVID-19 response? Anything new and different out of your committee?
Somebody called me and it knocked me off. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, Judge Brinkley wanted everybody to understand, because the one comment, the update I gave them about Kaya was that we're going to try to figure out how to get our lodge back open for food to eat in, as well as continue takeout. And he said, he's trying to warn everybody in Cook County that has their own business that we need to take it step at a time, and that if you can't do 50%, you can't do 50%, do 25. Start small and build up and get your processes, because it's going to throw everybody. And it sounds like Charlie reiterated it also, that it's different than the way you operated when there wasn't the virus. And so you just can't assume, oh, well, we can grow this as fast as we want. So he made that real clear that, well, Kathy, you don't have to do 50. Oh, okay, well, we're going to try for 50, and if they're not successful, maybe we roll it back. But I think his main thing was don't try to go so fast that you're not successful, and take your time and get feedback from your customers. And we're a little bit different because we can usually get feedback from our customers. So that was something that was a good takeaway, I thought. But on the you know, I thought the golf, other than the fact that tee times were, you know, not spaced as well as they could be now, that it was kind of backing up. But I thought, and that, you know, Dave Porter really worked on the golf thing, and I didn't have a lot of involvement, and I don't play that often. But are we ready to bring guests back to the golf? Well, if you do one amenity, you've got to do them all, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's probably right. Probably right. So, Charlie.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the request for golf, the two requests there, this board made a conscious decision to try to discourage or limit the amount of visitors into the community. Okay, so we made that conscious decision. I've gotten several other requests from people saying, you know, my kids have been quarantined for 2 days. Can they play golf, or can they go on the lake? So, you know, it's bristling. I still think if you look at what's going on out there, the death rate in Texas continues to increase. Okay, so it's not slowing necessarily; it's continued to increase, and I think it is a debate. I mean, when you look at it, it's back and forth in terms of really what you do. We opened up the lodge at nearly 15%, or excuse me, 50% capacity, and we had a nice little uptick in business, but we didn't get blown away. So what that kind of tells me is there may still be some people that are waiting and seeing of, hey, I don't necessarily want to get out. So I do think we've got to be careful. And I think that there is still a wide range of opinions and perspectives on, you know, how safe it is to come. I mean, or how safe it is to get out there. So I guess the operative issue is, are we ready to open up to visitors being able to use all of our facilities here? To me, that's the operative question out there. And that would really kind of answer, you know, a lot of those questions there. So on the lodge, I mean, if you've seen what we've done, is we believe we're complying with all of the governor's orders. You go into the assembly room, and it looks as if a government designed a restaurant, okay, with spacing and everything. So, and it's not particularly efficient. I did come in Friday night. We had a nice meal. The other couple that sat 6 feet away from us, they had a great time in the whole bit. Now, I do think we probably still, David asked that we kind of leave everything the way it is for now. Let's get some more experience underneath our feet and see really, you know, how it goes from here, because we just had 3 days, you know, with the lodge and not knowing, you know, how it's going to be. So I think isn't that the big issue of, you know, visitors on using, you know, guests using all facilities?
So yeah, I think, you know, I do think it's still an evolving situation, and where we shouldn't move too fast, kind of leave what we got in place. The issue of using the lodge, if we were to use it for line dancing or something like that, do we have to move the tables?
Yes.
So that's, I for now, I'd rather not get into that, but I don't know. Jim, you have comments?
Well, I brought this up last week. I think we should allow them to do it if they social distance. I think moving the tables is not a difficult task. We move tables here all the time. I will, but at the same time, you guys, or Charlie said, we're going to ease into it. And he just said that again. And on Saturday, I came in here in the afternoon, and there was nobody in there on the assembly room. So we don't need that room, or that was as of Saturday. So 2 days in, and then you can't tell today, obviously, because we're not a typical day. So my point is, I don't think during the weekdays it's going to get used that much, but I could be wrong. And so, or at least in the morning, it's definitely not going to get used that much. So you could clear out part of it, put the tables back, just to allow them to do something, as long as they're social distancing. As long as they're people they're members and they've been here, they're following that same rule.
Well, with line dancing, you've got in excess of 40 people, and I don't know that room's big enough to space.
Well, you're not supposed to have more than 10 people, of course.
Right.
Still,
so The tap dancers can make it work, it sounds like, because they're a smaller group. The line dancers, I don't think can make that work.
They can break
So,
up. They can decide to
and then
break
all
up
the
in groups.
card clubs, how do you play cards?
You can't play cards.
So there's some things, you know, maybe we inch into it and try some of them, but we really need to plan Memorial and get that nailed down and what we're going to open and what statement we want to put out, I think, and have that plan ready, because Memorial's coming no matter what, and we know when it is. But if we got time to talk it through, and I know there'll probably be a ton of guests coming.
Yeah.
Family, hopefully, and you know that's what you'd like to see. But that's going to be our big, I think, our big project.
Do we have any specific plans for Memorial Day, or it's just a busier day?
It's just a busier.
Okay.
Lake gets really busy. I'm sure the golf
Right.
course busy, and I would assume people really like to bring in their guests on that long weekend.
Well, gonna have Mother's Day next weekend. People
Yeah.
are wanting to bring in
And
visitors.
I bet we see a lot. And the lake was very active up until about 3 o'clock on Sunday, and then it got quiet.
I feel like there's a little bit of I hate to say it, it's an oxymoron in what we're trying to discuss here. I mean, we have this suggestion that people not have visitors, but then we're saying we're not going to allow visitors to use the lodge or not, or use the lodge or the golf course or the lake. But we're just suggesting it otherwise for visitors in general not to come. But in reality, they're coming, and we're not doing it. We can't do anything about it. I mean, I know there was a lot of visitors out there yesterday on the lake. I just know situations of that, and I'm not the policeman, so I can't do anything about it. So.
Yeah, that's what Jim's right, and that's what we said. We can't stop people from having guests. The only thing that we can do is stop them from using the facilities that our members use. We can do that. And those facilities are the same facilities that our high-risk members use. And that's the issue to me. Because if you let a guest come in to the lodge and dine, calling it within a household, and then another one of our high-risk members comes in right after that, where do you draw that line? I don't think we're ready to make that call. I think that's going to take another week or so.
But what the challenge with that, that's correct logic, but the challenge with it is if they're bringing in a guest and they touch that guest in any way and then they come to the lodge, you still have the problem.
Yeah.
Because people aren't following the rules.
That's the reason that notice we put out there says, we prefer you not bring guests. However, if you do, then they can come, they stay on the roads and in your house. And then you are responsible for self-quarantining yourself for the next 14 days.
And I think we're just talking this out loud to explain the questions that came up, is why it's difficult to say one way or the other.
Randy or any of y'all on the phone, any other thoughts? Steve, you're a restaurant guy. What are you thinking?
I think we're still in the bad zone. We shouldn't be, opening things up yet. I think it's a little too early. I think we're in trouble because I think Mother's Day and Memorial they're gonna bring in a lot of guests, and they're gonna be all over us, and we're just gonna have to see what happens. Because I see a lot of guests, so I don't think we want to say yes, we can do things yet. That's my opinion.
So on the lodge, that might be something that's used quite a bit for Mother's Day if we're doing any kind of specials or anything. The lake, I still don't see how the lake, people using the lake necessarily poses a threat. So the lodge would be my biggest concern as far as eating. Even golf, I think our provisions we've put in place are going to keep that pretty safe. The big question would be the lodge.
Yeah.
Kathy?
I agree. The outdoor activity is so much easier. As long as it's not basketball, I guess. But we can do so much more outside than in a facility like the lodge or where you're enclosed. But it's just a matter of when would you feel like saying something and publishing something to encourage that outdoor activity. And maybe we take a little more time and think this through.
Are we any different than the average Joe going to Los Mariachis and coming back home and going to the lodge? I mean, is that any different than a guest? I mean, I have a hard time with this. I mean, I really do, because my kids go to daycare every day, so I feel like I'm a hypocrite.
I know we frequent Nick's, and we went to take out food, and I talked to the Nick, and he said, we're just not comfortable opening yet. We're not going to do that to ourselves, and we're not going to do that to our employees. They're not ready. That's the only one I've been to lately besides the lodge. So, but there's apparently still some business owners who are worried.
But to Randy's point, people here, members here, go to Walmart or go to Home Depot, and they go to different places outside of Kiowa, and they come back. And is that any different than? And they come in contact with people. Hopefully, people are social distancing, but I mean, that's why all this is difficult to talk about. There's so many combinations of things we don't control.
Jim Fox.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's being said, and the local stuff that we're doing, we're not the high risk area. And I think the guests and the visitors that we're talking about are oftentimes from the higher risk areas. And that's a little bit of a distinction to me is that they're exposed to more risk there, and then they bring it here, as opposed to us going out to Walmart or whatever, where we don't have a lot of COVID going on. So to me, it's a little bit of difference.
Well, I'm obviously high risk, so I look at it a little different than probably most of you. So otherwise I wouldn't be wearing this hot mask. But you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice. And I saw enough craziness on the lake off of my dock this weekend. And the East Beach was crazy. They were having a good time though, but they were so close to each other, it looked like one of the Florida beaches. I was just blown away.
So I guess I don't think because people are violating these things or not doing things smart, that's a good reason not to try to continue to do things to prevent it. That'd be my opinion right now. So I would want to see us continue to move slow. Now, what can we do first? Can we allow the tap dancers to use the lodge? The only issue there, I think, really is the staff needed to move a few tables and everything. And then maybe when's the governor's next announcement is, I believe on the 18th.
Yeah.
So, but Kathy's right that Memorial Day is going to be the time that we're really besieged with a lot of this type stuff. And if it's time to open up everything, then I guess we can know by what the governor has decided on the 18th, and we can see if we have some huge uptick in number of incidences in North Texas because they have opened things up. I know a little more on the 18th. So
yeah, the death rate is still much higher than they had anticipated for Texas, especially Dallas.
Okay.
And Houston.
So to Jim's question. Do we want to go on and move forward with allowing maybe it's case by case requests through Charlie to use the lodge for groups under 10 people that can continue to effectively space?
Well, it's extra cleaning, because whatever they've touched, whatever they've been around, it would be additional cleaning for the maintenance staff. After you move tables out, then you're going to, wherever the tap dancers or whatever group comes in, you're going to have to clean again.
Technically, that should be cleaning for anybody that comes through that room and while they're eating too. It shouldn't be much different.
Right. Do we do that, Charlie? When somebody leaves, do we totally sanitize?
Yeah, that was
the
in
table?
his document, that what they do after each, they needed that extra 15 minutes to do the cleaning after the tables are cleared.
Right. And I guess we're trying to keep our staff employed, and they're not real busy right now. Am I correct in that, or?
They should be able to handle that. So I think what I heard the proposal would be to allow members and members only to come in the lodge and resume some of the activities that they can do while still maintaining proper social distancing. Okay, so is that a fair statement right there? No more than 10, still practice social distancing. I clearly think cards are out of the question. You can't be passing cards or chips or any of that stuff back and forth. So I think if it's 10, then it could be tap dancing or line dancing. And maybe line dancing comes up with 2 or 3 shifts or whatever it may be. Okay, we'll leave them to that. So I do think that that's something that we can break down the room. The tables may be jammed on either side of the room, but I don't think they'll necessarily care, right? As long as they get to use the room, then we're able to do that. And I think Monday is a logical day to do it. Okay. It also might be one of the things that I would like to discuss at our meeting next week would be, do we discontinue food service in the lodge on Monday and go back to the normal schedule? Because Monday is a real slow day with the golf course being closed. So I think, but we can wait till next week to decide on that. And then that would allow us to do these other activities, on Monday and maybe some other groups move. I do think that we've got to make sure that we do provide proper direction and guidance to make sure that they are sanitizing. My people are sanitizing, they're social distancing. I think what I've observed is some people haven't seen their friends for a while, and when they see them, it's natural gravitate to want to get close to them. It's like, no, we can't be doing that. So how we get past that, I think would be critical. But I don't think that's a reason why not to do it. I think we need to say, okay, let's be educated about this. Let's do it. I do think it's too early to open up guests on the golf course. I just think that to me, that just opens a big floodgate, so to speak, in terms of, okay, here we're back. I think on the lake, to me, it's clearly, they're clearly socially distancing from other people out on the lake. I mean, boats shouldn't get 6 feet apart, right? Yeah, they're not. Okay, they should be 100 feet apart. So that's not an issue. Now, I will tell you that I did see several boats this weekend that appeared to have mixed groups of people on them. Okay, but that's really, I don't want to say that's their problem or that's their issue, but it is. I do think we've got to make sure that we don't allow that to spill over into other areas. Okay, the beaches are the things that concern me at this point in time. But then again, if our members are higher risk or don't want to be around it, then they can, turn and walk away to a certain extent. Now we could step up the patrol on that, but then again, the enforcement of that gets to be, more problematic. And that could, I don't even know, it could have been all kids that live out here. Who knows? I don't know what it was. But I do know that there are people that are chomping at the bit to try to get outside and do additional things above and beyond what they're doing right now. So.
To your first point on
you summarized what we just proposed for using the lodge with less than 10 people, but the way you said it, it seemed like it was only Monday, and it would be once we quit doing dinner. It seems, I would rather that say, I mean, especially if there's certain groups have to divide up and conquer to, you know, to get under 10 people, that we say that that's every morning at least, because we're not from up until noon, because we're not having any people come and use this room before then, or I don't think we will. Or if we don't have enough numbers, or they could use another room. So I'm suggesting it's not just Monday, but it's any day up until noon until we get more information.
I guess we could try it for a week and see if suddenly the lunch crowds start getting so large that we are using the assembly room quite a bit more, right? So maybe try it for a week like that.
Yeah, didn't we have a request for the sewing bee? They wanted it.
Yeah, that's gonna be, well, it's actually another page in here, yeah. And they would actually be probably best suited in this room right here. There's power outlets and they can do their own sewing on all these tables.
Can't hear you. Can you hear me now? Still muted.
Good.
Now you're on.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Yeah, the thought process would be that this room would be available. We've had requests for several groups to have meetings in here, so we're going to open that back up for them. And then also the sewing group would probably fit very well in here right now. So I think that's important. The hardest thing is kind of trying to prioritize, because if we get a group that wants to be in here next Monday at 1 o'clock and go till 3, we've got a board meeting, we need to, have it too. So we're just going to Penny's just working through the scheduling on that. So yeah, I think your comment's fine. I think probably assembly room. I think we'll have to see what kind of issues that, develop out of it, and does it make more sense to, confine it to a couple days, whatever. I think we don't have enough business under us to know quite yet. But yeah, I think I'm open for that.
Okay, so I think that's the form of a motion. So where the assembly room is available to what the extent we can move tables in groups of 10 or more, can have activities in there 10 or less, and maintain the social distancing any day of the week, and tentatively see how that's working, given our lunch crowd. And then secondly, either committee meetings or groups or sewing clubs that can fit into the Southwest room in its current configuration. What do we have? 10 tables, that if they can use the tables as is without having to bring in additional seating or additional tables. So that's, I guess I'll make that motion. Do we have a second? Second by Jim. Any other comments, discussion, or questions? Only talking about the lodge. Anybody else? Comments, thoughts? Okay, all in favor of that, raise your hand or say aye. Anybody opposed to that? Okay, motion passes unanimously. So, lake and golf course guest, we maintain the policy as is for right now until as things evolve. So we'll continue to meet next Monday again, and then on the 18th, well, the governor's announcement comes out, and that's when we have our full board meeting that evening, correct? So I assume we'll know more about the governor's announcement, unless he usually does it during the day. So yeah, so we'll discuss them at that time as well on our regular board meeting. See, so we have a clerk, yeah, we have a couple of requests there.
Really only one. This is the sewing.
This,
Pete Mason.
so the sewing group, we've decided the Pete Mason one. Charlie, you want to go over that?
Yes, Pete's asking for the exception request for his daughter, son, and daughter-in-law to use the facilities. They've isolated themselves for 3 weeks before coming here, very protective not to bring the virus. They arrived on March 17th at Lake Kiowa and will complete their 2-week quarantine tomorrow. Well, that doesn't sound right because we're already in May. They've not been in contact with any other Kiowa residents that stayed on their property. They plan to stay here through May, working remotely from their house. Request is for golf course and lake use. So I think it's, besides the dates, which I've got a question about, and I can get
Well,
the
you look at his email date,
Yeah.
it was April 30th. So this, we're already 4 days past that.
It was probably, they probably arrived on April 17th instead of March 17th is what I'm guessing. Doesn't that look right? If they, April,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say April 17th.
Yeah. So I'll have to, as long as that checks out, I will verify that they have been in quarantine for 2 weeks up here. And I think it's standard with what we typically allow, that they've quarantined, sheltered in place here. So
everybody okay with approving that one? Okay. Any additional business at this time?
Did we answer the questions?
Sorry, Jim, say that again.
Yeah. Did we answer all of the questions that were mailed in just with our general discussion, or did you want to go through any of those individually? I know one of them was talking about the walking track and that sort of thing. So I don't know that we really answered any of that.
You're correct. Yeah, we do need to do that. So let me see if I can figure out how to get back there. And Charlie, some of these will be for you to.
Well, I think I can remember there were the two related to the golf course, which I think we've answered that. There was one about doing a separate dumpster down there for cardboard. And there was another about the condition of the walking trail.
One about some delivery looks like they're thinking Amazon was not allowed inside.
I have no idea what happened because I see FedEx, Amazon, and I get packages at my door every day. So
Yep. I agree.
The only thing that possibly could have happened would be if it was a suspect delivery, somebody came up and they did not look like they had proper credentials or vehicle and tried to get in. But I'll get with Chief on that and find out, because the amount of packages that come in here, because the next request is a dumpster so I can put all the Amazon boxes in.
Yeah, so. Charlie, there was one more subpart to that last one about opening up the Lake Kiowa Library. Any thoughts on?
It's open today, and that's dictated by the Women's Club and the Water Department. POA has nothing to do with the library.
Okay, so it's open, is it?
Well, there was a posting that went out that it opened today, I think. Okay.
When rain stopped coming into the office, it was all sitting there. So since I live over there, I went ahead and picked up all the books in the containers.
Are you talking about the big? Oh, the big light. All of the books in the SUD. Oh wow. Well, there was a posting out that they had opened or were opening. So.
Yeah, so I guess the real answer though is that's what the women's club decides, not. Okay. Yeah, they clean every page. That would be. Okay. So we answered Donna's question about the tap dance group. Can we get a dumpster once or twice a month to put boxes in it? What's your opinion on that?
What are you going to say?
Back on, I mean, we didn't leave the package thing. Apparently Amazon is using private citizens like Uber or something to deliver packages, I think. So I don't know if that's, I mean, to your point, I don't know if they still should have some kind of credentials.
They should, and that's the first time I've heard of that, and there's hundreds of packages delivered every day. No, all mine show
I
up.
get a lot of packages from Amazon too, but I'm just pointing out that maybe that's what it was. The obviously didn't get packaged or cheap, but if there is these individual drivers for Amazon now, how would we deal with that? I think something we may have to ask security to say, have we ever turned to the right call?
Yeah, and fact of the matter is, there is hundreds and hundreds of people that are allowed access in the lake every single day. I'm not talking about with toll tags. I'm talking about general contractors, subcontractors. The last week, I think we averaged 150 guest passes per day that were requested. So there's all kinds of people that are coming in here. I'll get with Chief Buckaloo on that one and find out, what the exact circumstances are. I know that a big thing is right now was the Instacart. I mean, the grocery deliveries are going crazy right now. So there's a number of different ones. So I'll get with Chief Buckaloo on that one and see what the issues are to make sure that they're.
And just because we're on, make for the minutes and for the record. I mean, a lot of those questions I'm happy for them. I'm sure just like any of you guys to come here, but a lot of times these questions can go to Charlie, and I'm sure he can chase them down and talk to security or talk just suggesting for the record that they don't have to come before us because they're going to end up going back to Charlie anyhow.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Well,
policy change.
Yeah, but we've opened up this meeting for
I'm
questions
suggesting
ahead of time.
That people can do that in the future.
Mhm.
They don't have to.
Yep. Okay. What's your thoughts on the dumpster there, Charlie?
Hey, Charlie,
Yes.
excuse me.
Can you microphone?
I've got it's not
Oh,
muted.
okay. I'm sorry. Thanks.
CERT would like to volunteer to take shifts. And if you could bring a container in, whether it's cardboard or recycle or dump their mattress or whatever, we would man it. And maybe it's twice a week or once a month or whatever works. And we would schedule ourselves to man it so we didn't have the wrong things going into the container. If you were open to discuss that.
So it'd have to be blocked off.
We'd have to put a
Somehow
fence around
otherwise.
it. Yeah, we'd have to put a fence around it. Now, the containers Gainesville uses at their recycle center for cardboard, you can't get anything in it that's not flat. So they have the right kind of containers, but that wouldn't stop somebody from dumping outside the container. And that's what we saw at the campgrounds. But if maybe we take that offline and you think it through if.
Yeah, and I'll make a couple statements is recycling, as much as I'm disappointed personally, because I personally was very involved in it, is just not a good business model. Okay. At this point in time in the United States and even probably around the world, this pandemic has probably tainted it even that much more.
Right.
And I think that we did away with it. I personally tried to continue recycling, and Denton has shut down their recycling. Okay, Frisco still may have it, but they really shut it down.
Gainesville has it.
I said Denton shut down the,
right. But
theirs.
There's still places you can take it.
Now, I'd be curious, really, if you looked at Gainesville, is it really going to recycle, or are they just taking it and throwing it? Because that's the other question. But
I don't know.
Having said that, we tried the community recycling here a couple of years ago. It started off good, and then it became a mess. So we'd have to build a dedicated space for it with a fence. So I think that's one consideration we can look at. One of the things is we have 2 major cleanups a year. They're very popular. We typically have done that. My predecessor tried it, and I tried it once too, where we had a remote drop off for people to drop things off. And it typically, degraded fairly quickly because all kinds of stuff got in there. So my deal is that I think some of the pushback is right now because the trash company is pushing us to do things probably the way we should have done it all along. Things need to be in bin or they need to be in bags that are intact. Okay. When I drove around this morning, I saw some things that were still boxes and everything put out there. So from my perspective is I would rather work continually on education of it. I get a lot of boxes. I cut them up, break them down, put them in my bin, and they get hauled away. So I do think that's something we can do, but we may have to look at increasing our trash from 24 cents to $1.24 or $2.24 additional. And I don't know if we really want to do that. So let me think about that, and then I'll go offline on it. I don't think having a dumpster there on a regular basis is the way to go, because when will we stop that? I mean, we're just continuing to add, another service versus if people have a lot, they can haul it to Gainesville, they can haul it to the dump in Whitesboro, and it's taken care of from that perspective. Yeah. But I'm open to that. Let me look into it. We can talk about it the next meeting. Okay. There was another question that came up, and from John Kalina regarding watercraft. I observed many watercraft that do not have a 2020 sticker. That means they have not proven they have liability insurance on their watercraft. There are so many watercraft drivers that break the rules. They probably haven't passed the required boating test. Recently, I've seen many boats with 6 to 10 people about the same age, obviously not family members. The recent rules say visitors are not allowed on the lake. What's being done to enforce the rules? So, we have lake transgressions. Actually, Lake Patrol went on the lake this week. I don't know how effective they were. It was really kind of their first big weekend. I'll get with Chief Buckaloo on it. This time of year, unfortunately, typically we always have issues like this when we have new, it's new season in the spring. We have new boaters out there. So we'll buckle down and continue to communicate from that perspective. The stickers, the 2020 stickers, they're available. We request that people fill those out online, and we've had a number of people that have done it. Hopefully everybody in here that has a boat has the new 2020 stickers. If not, shame on you all, but I did mine and I got them. So I think that's something we will step up with security and do it. The 6 to 10 people, we kind of we kind of said, hey, I don't know that we want security enforcing that. I'd rather enforce the stickers on the boats and the watercraft rules and all of that stuff. So, but yeah, that's a good point. Unfortunately here, it is, that we face that on a fairly regular basis every year about this time of year. So, Clark.
What about the question on the walking track up at water crossing number 2? I have someone who has called me on my phone and left me a voicemail about that same subject. I did not call him. I have not had a chance to call him back to find out what the issue is, but what is the issue?
Can I quick address that?
Are you talking about water crossing 2 walking path or the one below the dam?
Water crossing 2 walking path.
What's questions about it?
I thought we had a question from somebody about that.
No, that was the one. That's the one below the dam.
Below the dam. Okay. I'm going to have to call him back and see what the issue is. I don't know.
But both of those have the.
When was the last time you walked below the dam? Oh, I see. Jim got a question or a comment.
I was just going to suggest, if you want to refer that to the Parks and Recreation Committee, that particular question or those, send them to me and we'll take a look at those and kind of try to address that in the future if there's a way to help improve that.
So, and there's two issues. The North Horseshoe, formerly known as the Nature Trail, was originally set up to be really kind of a wild area and continue to have wild animals out there and trees and the whole bit. So we've really worked hard to knock down that vegetation. Unfortunately, it's in the floodplain. I mean, in any material that you put in there, unless you do an asphalt or concrete, is going to get washed into the lake. So that's one that's, you know, we've got to decide. And I think Jim Fox brought it up in terms of how does that go from a long range plan. The one below the dam, we had actually got some of the milled asphalt. We put it out there and we've raked it and we pulled out the vast majority of the big chunks. Okay. It is not set up as a running track, but I think the last time I went out there and went around it, I think that it's, you know, it's a trail, but I'll continue to go back down there and look again. I think that'll be a decision that Parks and Recs needs to decide is, do we want to go for that to be a paved, you know, if we're asking for it to be paved, then that's a whole nother animal than what we've gotten right now. So, but I do see people out there walking. So I know it can be done. And that's something that, you know, we'll go back and look at, but I think Jim Fox volunteering to go look at it would be exceptional. And then we can decide how much money we want to spend down there.
Yeah, so that the question was on the one by the dam, the written one.
Yeah.
Clark's, as I understand, was from somebody talking about the nature trail one. That's the one I do walk on. And, you know, they are there, the big chunks, but doesn't stop me from walking on it. But I'm sure it is, maybe it's difficult for some people, a little less mobile or something. So, okay. That's all the questions. We got any other business before we go? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, look at there, Clark. Motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? All right, Sam. Okay, all in favor of adjourning? Say aye. All right, so moved. We're out of here. Thank you all.